I want to focus my talk on something that will have value to everybody here regardless of what your discipline is. Those of you who are in criminal justice, I'm a little bit closer to that field, and so you may find a particular application for what I'm talking about. But I want to focus on intuition, which is one of the human mental resources. And those of you in criminal justice will see quickly how it applies to your work, but I'm hoping that anybody here will see how it applies to your life. What is it, first of all? Intuition is knowing something without knowing why. It is it's the journey from A to Z without stopping at all the letters on the way. It's coming to a conclusion quickly without necessarily taking the time at that moment to assess why you came to that conclusion. And you can think of it as like seeing the image before all the pieces of the puzzle are in place. You figure out what it is. And like every creature in nature, we are designed to protect ourselves from danger. And intuition is the primary resource that we use for protecting ourselves from danger. In fact, the root of the word, inter, it means to guard and to protect. And so most people don't make that connection between intuition and safety, but I'm hoping that today I can encourage that we all do that. In our case, when we look at ourselves relative to other animals, we didn't get the largest claws or the biggest fangs or the greatest muscles, but we did get the biggest brain. And that has allowed us to rise above all other animals in the food chain. There is nothing, not a single animal on earth, that looks at human beings as its primary prey. There's no animal walking around a forest or a jungle saying, I just can't wait to get me a human. And the reasons are that we're very bony, but above all, we're very dangerous. We are dangerous to the animals that would consider us to be prey. And so we can kill a bee or a whale or any animal on Earth as a result of this big brain that we've got. And so the resource that we use most frequently in Western life, in Western cultures, is logic. I give you a logical reason why a thing is true. I don't just tell you it's my gut feeling, let's go with it. But the reality is that logic is plodding and unoriginal and far too slow to be useful in an emergency because it's slow to accept reality and it's burdened by judgment. And logic spends valuable time thinking about the way things ought to be or used to be or could be or might be. And in nature, an animal doesn't spend any time doing any of that. An animal threatened by another animal does not use logic. It uses intuition entirely. It responds either by intuition or by instinct. What's the difference? Instinct is inbred. It is inherent in the animal. But intuition is a process that is constantly learning. So we learn throughout our lives and we gain new distinctions about something, and then that goes into our process. We slow down as we're driving by the car accident, and we look. Why? Because we're gaining a piece of information. Ah, that intersection is blind. Ah, those small cars are dangerous. Ah, those young people drink too much and drive. Whatever it is that you take away from that accident, you take it away for the purposes of your survival. That's why we're fascinated with a recently discovered dead body, and we're not at all affected the same way by a mummy in the museum, because the mummy in the museum has no relevance to us. The recently discovered dead body might be a disease of relevance to us, might be a virus of relevance to us, or it might be an injury that's caused by the greatest predator on earth, which is human beings, the ones we fear the most. We might think we fear sharks the most, but sharks can be entirely avoided. There's a perfect precaution for avoiding sharks, spoken in 5 words: don't go in the ocean. Can't be simpler. But there is no perfect precaution for avoiding human predators or being safe from them. I want to tell you a fast story that's not in a book you would have read, involving a woman I interviewed named Kate. And she and her daughter used to go to movies with a group of other mothers every week. And they would go usually at dusk, so that by the time they came out of the theater it was dark, and they'd go in vans together or cars together or what have you. But on this particular movie, which was Jurassic Park, the mother took her daughter to see the film and she parked far away from the theater because she had some shopping to do. She took stuff back to her car, and then she walked over to the theater. And in line at the theater, she was with all of her friends and with all of their daughters, and there was a man behind her who, for no reason that she could explain to you or me, made her uncomfortable. He was wearing a T-shirt, and the T-shirt said "Afraid of the Dark" on it. And he was wearing gym pants, and something about him gave her the creeps. And sure enough, as they were standing in line, he spoke to her, and he said, looking at all of the women and all of their daughters, he said, "Ladies' night out?" And she sort of said, "Uh-huh." She didn't want to engage with him. That's the end of the story in terms of everything that she had to react to involving that man. They then saw the movie about Jurassic Park, about ancient predators, and they came out of the movie, and one of the friends said to the mother, "Do you want to ride to your car?" And she said, "No, we're fine, we'll walk." And the moment she said that and saw the other mothers leave, she was upset. She realized she'd made a mistake, and she was thinking about that man. He wasn't even in the theater anymore, but that was on her mind as she and her daughter walked back the 2 blocks to her car. And so they walked down the street, and she could not shake the feeling of that guy in line. Now, we don't know today whether she saw him again out of the corner of her eye. We don't know what it is that pushed the intuitive button in her. But she began to walk faster and faster. And her daughter, who was 8 years old, said, "Is it a race?" And she said yes, and thought, "This will be a good idea, we'll run." And just as she began to run, she turned around, and sure enough, that man was following them. The man with the T-shirt that said "Afraid of the Dark." And she realized as they were running, they would not be able to outrun him. And she would have to get to the car and act very quickly. And she made the decision that she would get to the car, she would unlock the car on her daughter's side, put her daughter in, and then walk around to the other side. And she did all of that. She unlocked the car, and she walked around to the other side, but before she got into the car, the man was already upon her. And so she got herself into the seat of the car, and she just watched. And she said to me later, "I could see that my legs were kicking so much that he wouldn't be able to get hold of me." Basically, he had a position of disadvantage. And she said, "I thought to myself, car key, car key, car key." She said, "The next thing I realized, I kind of came back to consciousness in the car because the car door was slamming. And all the things that I'd told myself to do, start the car, drive away fast, I had done them." And she said, when I thought about the car key, I thought, well, I could put this in his eye. I could stick him in the eye with this key, and that would settle this problem very quickly. And she said, that is when I realized I had already done it. She had already stuck him in the eye with the car key. He was already sitting on the curb doing what men do when you stick them in the eye with a car key. And she had already driven away, and the car door had already slammed. All of these things had happened without her conscious participation. The only part that was conscious to her was the impulse that she got that said car key. And she said that she felt terrible and wouldn't want to blind somebody. And she said, at least I didn't, I could have stuck him in both eyes. At least I didn't do that. Turns out she had stuck him in both eyes and didn't even know it. And the next thing she heard was her daughter saying, "Mom, you didn't put your seatbelt on." So her daughter was pretty much insulated from the drama of the experience. And she said to me later on that she said it was a terrible thing to do. I felt like it was natural that I was part of nature. And I said, well, sure. He did something very stupid. He attacked a woman who was with her young daughter. What do we all know about animals? You can walk past the elephants, but not if the cow rather is between, the calf is nearby. Or you can agitate the bear a little bit, but you sure can't agitate the mother bear who's with her cubs. And so he did basically a dumb thing and had the consequence for it. Later she explained to me that she knew that he didn't have a gun. I said, why did you know that? And she said because he was wearing a tight shirt, because he was wearing gym pants that wouldn't be strong enough at the belt to provide a gun, and because of what he did. If he'd had a gun, he might have just pointed a gun at me to get into the car or to get access to me, but he didn't do any of that. He did this other full-style attack that didn't work well for him. And so whether she's right or wrong about whether he had a gun, whether she's right or wrong about any of her assessments that come now after the fact, all of the work was done by intuition in an instant. And that resource, what I really hope you're left with today is that resource is absolutely brilliant, and it's our nuclear defense system if we listen to it. And it has a competitor in our mind. There's intuition standing here to guard and protect, and there's denial standing over here. Denial is the one that says, this isn't really happening to me. Oh, he's not really dangerous. I don't really have to worry about this problem. Denial is a human resource that's enormously valuable to us for some things and enormously destructive to us for others. Example, you need denial to be willing to sit on top of a rocket ship that's lit and is flying into outer space. You need to be willing to compartmentalize and somewhat deny the risks. You need denial to build a bridge across an enormous river, particularly if you were the first person to ever do that. There are places where it's a valuable resource in our lives, but I would say for 90% of our lives, it's a tremendously destructive resource. It's the thing that allows us to not see something we're looking right at. If intuition is getting from A to Z without stopping along the way, or intuition is knowing without knowing why, then denial is seeing the thing clearly and choosing not to see it. It's denial to say, yes, my boyfriend was violent with me, but that's only when he drinks, or he had a really bad day at work, or he really apologized, or he says he won't do it again. That's denial. That's denial. That's really seeing the thing right in front of you and choosing not to see it. For women, in this culture, that is a consistent feature of their lives, in that they get a feeling about something and they override that feeling. And there's a great example of this that I think we can all relate to, which is, imagine a woman in a building late at night. She's on the 10th floor, and she pushes the button for the elevator. And the elevator comes, and the doors open, and there's a man inside who causes her fear. It might be the look of him, or what he's wearing, or the context, or whatever it may be. We don't need to know. She has a feeling of fear. And what does she do? She says, I don't want to be the kind of person who doesn't get into an elevator and reacts to fear. I don't want to be the kind of person who is afraid all the time. And so she gets into a steel, soundproof chamber with someone she's afraid of. And there is not another animal in nature that would even remotely consider such a thing. There's not another animal in nature that would say, danger over there, I'll go over there, except for the predators. And so if you can think about this in the context of animals, you cannot imagine an antelope in Africa that sees the lion or hears the breaking twigs in the brush in the night and turns with fear and then says, it's probably nothing. But human beings do that every day, right? We undermine our own intuitive signals. And yet, we do know that there is a universal code of violence that we understand, meaning we know when someone is likely to be a predator. We've exchanged a whole series of signals with that person that's been refined over millions of years, messengers flying back between you and me that tell you that I'm not dangerous to you right now. And those messengers, when they fly back and forth between us and say, wait a minute, this is a problem. In the context I'm in a vulnerable situation and I feel that fear response. Those messengers are absolutely brilliant. And so I go to animals again. Imagine two wolves, and they come upon each other in the forest on some forest trail, and they don't know each other. And they look at each other and they sniff, and one of their ears goes back, and then the tail becomes rigid and the hair goes up on the back of their necks and their mouths dry, and one attacks the other. Well, you cannot imagine that the victim wolf says, oh man, I had no idea that was coming. Because those were all signals, and human beings are no different than that. Human beings also give pre-incident indicators or signals prior to violence. The most preventable crime in America is spousal homicide. Which happens, if you count boyfriends as well, that happens about once every 4 hours in America, that a woman is killed by a boyfriend or a husband. And about once a day, about once every 8 hours, that a husband is killed by a wife, although usually in self-defense. Whether it's immediate self-defense, meaning in the moment, or it's the belief that he's going to kill her at some time. Generally, the spousal homicides committed by women are more on the defense side. But do those happen out of nowhere? Or is there a whole history that precedes it that is as predictable as water coming to a boil? He has been violent to her before. She has been afraid of him. He controls who she sees, what she wears, what friends she has. He has been reluctant to let her go. He has made threats that he would kill her in many cases. There's been a restraining order already. There's been 4 visits by the police to the house already for previous domestic violence incidents. So those are pre-incident indicators, right? Those are things that tell you that you're on a particular path. And you, the younger folks in the room who are students, you have a path that we can assess today. Let's say the predictive question is, will you finish college? What would be the pre-incident indicators to finishing college successfully? You buy the books, you show up on time, you complete the assignments. What would be the pre-incident indicators to failing to finish college? You don't buy the books, you don't show up on time, you don't finish the assignments, you sit in the back, you don't listen, you don't participate, you don't care, you don't graduate. It's not a mystery. So human behavior is highly predictable in that sense. And I've had a whole career of people telling me that, I've interviewed people who were victimized, and they tell me afterwards, boy, now that I think of it, I realize that I had seen that car before in the underground parking lot. Or now that I think of it, I realize that I had a feeling of hesitation when I dated that guy. Or now that I think of it, I realize that that guy in the market that did the robbery was wearing a big heavy jacket, and it was a hot day. And I say to them, if it's in your head now, it was obviously in your head then. So a whole career I have of people telling me it came out of nowhere. And then if I'm just quiet, if I take a breath, invariably they say, although, now that I think of it, and they give me the pre-incident indicators that they saw. And what they mean when they say, I realize this now, but I didn't know it then, is that they knew it then, but didn't recognize the significance then. And that's fine. That can happen. You can have a situation where you cannot prevail and predict victimization ahead of time. That happens as well. But it's quite rare. It's quite rare. There was a friend of mine who, named Cynthia, who had a building contractor she didn't trust. And she didn't like him, she didn't trust him, she felt he was overcharging, she felt his car was too fancy. There were a lot of things about him that she didn't like. And she finally fired him, she told me, after several times of talking to me about it, and she'd been reluctant to fire him. So I asked her, why did you do it? And she said, well, because Ginger, my dog, really didn't like him. Ginger used to growl when he came over. And I said to her, you realize Ginger was responding to you. Ginger doesn't know anything about contractors or whether 15% on top of the bid is too much or whether his car is too fancy. Ginger knows you very well. You know all about building contractors. You're the expert on that. And so, Ginger, or all dogs, people tend to invest them with the belief that they have some great intuitive skill. Dogs. They don't. What they have, however, is a lack of the things that get in our way. The dogs do not have things like judgment or wishes or opinions or denial. The dog never says, I wish this would be different, this situation I'm in. The dog never says, it shouldn't be this way, or it didn't used to be this way, or I won't accept it. The dog, like every animal, apprises the thing, sees it, takes it on board, and reacts. And they see things only as they are. What we do is cross-examine our own impulses. We get an intuitive impulse that you don't trust me for some reason. And then you say, well, hey, he's just come to the college, he's doing a nice thing, why wouldn't I trust him? And you go through this whole process of cross-examining your own feelings as opposed to just listening. And it's not that intuition will always be right, because your interpretation of it may not be right, but it will always have your best interest at heart, the intuitive feeling. Because it's not a conscious process. It's as clear as your kidney. There it is. It's part of the mind-body organism. And it's really good to listen to it. You're getting in the car, you're driving away, and you say, did I remember to turn off the burner on the stove on that rice I was cooking? Now, if you're close to home, you'd have to be a form of idiot to not stop the car and go check. But that's what a lot of people do. They get the signal and they don't check. If you're in Hawaii already and you've just flown there, I don't expect you to go back to your house and check. But if it's cheap, meaning if it's an inexpensive precaution to apply, you go back into the house. You check the stove and guess what? The fire's not on. That'll happen. That will happen. And it also, in my experience, something else will be revealed to you that was important. Oh, there's the briefcase I needed for this presentation, and I had left it behind. Typically, your mind does not, your mind, in terms of intuition, does not waste your time.